So match one of the Bledisloe Cup is in the books. All Blacks getting themselves the victory over the Wallabies, and now match two happening this weekend in the final round of the Rugby Championship. And in this video, we're going to be trying our best to predict what Scott Robertson is going to be going with for his All Blacks lineup and reserves. But we've got a little bit of a twist on what we would normally do. Because this is a game that the All Blacks have already won the Bledisloe, it means that there are two type of lineups that Scott Robertson could go with. It will either be an extremely experimental side of the players who haven't received much game time, or he may go similar to what he went with in the first match to try and fine-tune a couple of the mistakes that the All Blacks did make. So with that being said, we're going to be playing two different Scott Robertson roles here. I am going to be selecting what I believe Scott Robertson would be going with based off last week and the players that he used there. Tim is going to be going with the fully experimental in terms of giving those young players the opportunity. So hopefully that makes sense. By the way, we've got Rugbyitch here to my side. What did you think of the first match, mate? First half, All Blacks were on fire. Second half, the Wallabies fired back. What is happening with the All Blacks in their last 20 minutes?
I don't know. It's some kind of record which they'll hopefully get rid of in this game. That's for sure. I think that's the one thing they definitely want to get off the book. But no, it was a good game of rugby, guys. It was a good game of rugby. I honestly thought it would be like a 40-10 game in favor of the All Blacks, but it turned out to be a better game actually in overall. You know, All Blacks going off to a fire start. It's the All Blacks. It's just what they do. The way that they set up those tries, that second one in particular, like the way Caleb Clark went through, Ratama selling the dummy, finding Reiko, it was a well-worked try. Even like the disallowed try they had in the second half, I think it was Ratama who scored that. But again, there's these unlucky moments. But at the same time, Wallabies, give them credit, they played pretty good rugby. Just a lot of errors really that could have cost them really winning this game. So they'll look back at it just being a bit disappointed because they know they could have done more. But hey, the Bledisloe Cup stays with New Zealand, so Razor is definitely happy on that front.
I still want it to be three matches, I'll be honest. I feel like when it was a three-match series, the second one meant a lot more. But now we're in that situation how, just like last year, it was a close game, but the All Blacks won. So then from there, we don't really get to see that intensity coming into match number two. But for yourself and your experimental Scott Robertson lineup, who is your front row that you have gone with?
So from our front row here, I am going from an experimental point of view here, guys, but I actually have gone with Ethan de Groot at the number one spot here, then Cody Taylor, and then to finish it off, I've actually gone with Pascal Tosi at the number three spot. So that's probably the big one, I guess, the eye-catching one right off the back. Again, with Ethan de Groot, we have to remember that he's only just coming back from injury, and yes, he did start that one against the Wallabies in the first, but I believe he'll get another opportunity here. I could have gone with Tamati Williams, but I think that's more of the expected pick actually in this one because they may want to switch around a few players. Cody Taylor just think is the guaranteed one, so I feel it's pretty hard to kind of take him out of this side. So that's the reason why he stays in.
Even in Wellington, Safamore's home ground, you're not giving him that crack?
Nah, I'm going with Cody Taylor.
Righty, so for myself, I've gone with number one, Ethan de Groot, number two, Cody Taylor, and then number three, Tyrell Lomax. So I have stuck with the same front row as what they did go with last week. I feel like Ethan de Groot, taking him off at halftime, yes, that could have been just to ease him back into it, but I still think him starting this match would be best if that is what they're going to be going with in the November internationals, and that is more than likely what we're going to see in the All Blacks front row. Cody Taylor having a great game. Tyrell Lomax, probably his quietest game, I would say, of the Rugby Championship so far. He's still had some decent moments. I found it quite interesting, though, looking through at some stats. There were only two All Blacks in that starting lineup that didn't beat a defender, Scott Barrett and Ethan de Groot. Everyone else registered one defender beaten at least. Lomax had one. Him stepping is always impressive, I have to say, and he loves doing it in Wellington, so hopefully he gets the crack into the starting side. But then saying that, his Hurricanes teammate Basilio Tosi also wouldn't mind getting the chance at Sky Stadium. Moving on to my locking duo. If Scott Robertson is playing it safe, I believe he will go number four, Scott Barrett. Now, I do think that there is a bit of an injury to Tupavai's shoulders, and because we're filming this so close to the end of the last game, I am going to, for now, have him out of my side. But I will say, if he's 100% match fit, I would have him as the number five. But because I'm erring on the side of caution for his injury, instead, this is where I actually think they may give Sam Darry the start at number five, rather than Tui Pelotu, who I think they may look to bring off the bench in this contest just to add a bit of experience and add some really strong ability to that line out. later on in the game. So Scott Barrett, Sam Derry, my locking duo.
No, I like it a lot. Like it a lot. For myself, I have also, of course, gone with Scott Barrett, the captain of the side, at number 4. But this is where I've partnered up with Patrick Tupeloto. I believe Tupeloto will be in there at the number 5. It's a bold call because you're putting him straight into the starting lineup, like you said. But I think it's that experience factor that just kind of counts it. So he's my number 5 for this game.
Righty, so now we move on to that loose forward trio. Now, of course, you are doing a slightly experimental side, but is there any experimentation that's going on in this loose forward trio, or are you sticking with the same?
There's not as much, I'd say, in this loose forward trio. I think this is probably the one area of the field where you can't do as much as you want, but you can make one change or so if needed. So that's what I've done in this case. I have stuck with Wallace at TT, the number 6. I think he just had too good of a game in that last test that it's hard to kind of put another player in that position. If I had to be a lot more experimental, I'd probably go with someone like Ethan Blackadder here, because he can play that position, or even like Luke Jacobson. You know, you can kind of there's a lot of players you can go about there, but I think for now, Wallace TT probably will maintain that spot. For number 7, this is actually where I've gone with Ethan Blackadder. I think this is a position where he could be utilized a lot here, and I think we haven't seen it, I think, so far throughout this Rugby Championship. He's normally been playing as a 6, but I'd like to see him kind of getting the 7 jersey because he has played there in the past. So it's something which you could offer something different to what we've seen with Sam Cane, because I think with Sam Cane, you know, he had that one moment in that game against the Wallabies where I think it was Matt Fazler with a try that I think was it the first try they scored, a second? I think it was the first try they scored in the game. Well, actually, no, it was a second. It was a second. And there was a moment where Sam Cane was like literally just right in front, and he could have just done better to kind of tackle him off. So I thought, if that's your main job, you know, kind of, you know, that's what you're kind of known for, then I would like to have a better player kind of in that situation. Who's just, you know, who's, I guess, better in the breakdown at least with Ethan Blackadder, and kind of better from a lineup standpoint. So that's the reason why I've called him the number 7 jersey. And then, of course, yeah, I have to go with Rugby here, number 8. It's just, yeah, you know, it's in Wellington. I think it's just suited.
And I am very similar in that regard. Number 6, I have gone Wallace Satiti. I think that man has really stepped up for the All Blacks and proven that no matter where you put him in that loose forward trio, he has to be somewhere, because he's just such a phenomenal talent. The work rate of the man throughout that game, he managed to make 10 tackles, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider how many breakdowns he was joining and where he was on the field most of the time, having those running meters as well, very good player to have for the ABs. Number 7, this is where I would not do it, but once again, we're trying to get in the mind of Scott Robertson.
Indeed, yeah.
I do think he's going to go with Sam Cane again, even though I would say it's not the best decision. Looking through at Sam Cane's stats from that first game, he had 1 carry that he got 4 meters, I believe it was, or something along those lines, or maybe it was 4 carries, but either way, making hardly any meters. He made 5 tackles, missing 3, one of which cost the All Blacks a try. It was one of his worst games that he's had in quite some time for the All Blacks, but luckily for him, the other 2 in the loose forward trio carried him through the game. I don't think he's earned the spot in the starting lineup for the second match, but we're talking about what we think Scott Robertson will be going with, and I do think he'll stick with Sam Cane. Unless Papali'i is match fit, then I could see Papali'i maybe going in at that number 7 for this contest. But now we move on to the 9-10 combination. This one got heavily criticised once again, not so much because of the number 9, but again the fly half. So for myself, number 9, I do not think you have to make a change here. Cortez Ratama, that game for me cemented him as the 9. And he was just absolutely phenomenal. 8 defenders beaten throughout that game up against the Wallabies. He was quick with his passing. He saw those gaps around the side of the breakdown and managed to make the most of it. Almost got himself a try if it wasn't for a forward pass. Number 10, this is where I think they will once again go with Damien McKenzie. Now, I have to say, in a game like this, the Bledisloe is already in the cabinet. You cannot win the Rugby Championship. Why not give someone like a Harry Plummer the chance at number 10 just to see how he does? But I don't see them doing it. That's the problem. We haven't seen enough experimentation from Scott Robertson to tell us that that is something he is willing to do. With the exception of that game up against Fiji, we haven't really seen anything but what has looked like pretty much the experienced, normal lineup that we would see from the All Blacks if we were in the Ian Foster era. But McKenzie is the number 10. He has some good moments, but he also has some absolutely shocking ones. It seems like a lot of the time he's just panicking when it comes to trying to create that miracle pass, trying to get a highlight reel try rather than just trying to get a try, which should be the goal for the All Blacks here.
Yeah, look, he had that one breakaway, which I thought was like really good, like where he kind of got across the line. I was like, oh my gosh, that's just Mackenzie for you. Like, there's no player that could kind of like turn and like actually find a breakaway still. Like normally, like Mwanga, the way he does it, he just like sidesteps and then he finds a gap, or he just breaks the line. Whereas Mackenzie kind of just runs around, kind of similar to like Will Jordan, really, where he can just find a gap right off the back. Even if it's on the side, he still finds it. But yeah, just he didn't get to do much after that situation. And like you said, he had a very 50-50 game. But I still think he'll be involved in this game. It's the reason why I've also included him. I put him at the number 10 jersey. But in this case, the partner him, I haven't gone with Cortis Latima. It's a bold call, but I've actually gone with TJ Paranar to start this game. And again, we do have to remember, we're playing within Wellington. So, it's a stopping ground for TJ. And I think it's one of those where, well, this could be his last game. It could honestly be his last game for the All Blacks guys. So we have to keep that in mind. So I wouldn't be surprised if they would kind of be a good send-off really for him to kind of start the game. So that's kind of the really good main factor right on this. If it wasn't for that, then I do agree Cortis Latima is probably the suitable choice. But I think for now, TJ is probably the guy that I'd look at in this situation.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because TJ, like during those games up against England, he was decent. He had some good moments. But I do think that unfortunately for him, his form has gone downhill, and maybe that is a bit of a confidence thing that he's not quite finding those same gaps that he normally would. I also think that the ruck speed just keeps on slowing down when he makes his way onto the field. It sounds harsh, but when you look at the difference between the starting 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes, maybe that is why the All Blacks aren't scoring as many points. Sounds very critical, but he has been coming off the bench, TJ, and sometimes just not quite able to get that momentum going forward. Now, Cortis Latima can also be guilty of that. He was coming off the bench in the second game up against the Springboks, but I just want to see some tries scored by the All Blacks in that last 20 minutes. I'd just love to see a point scored. That is something that they haven't been able to do throughout the last 5 games. That's 100 minutes at the end of a contest. The All Blacks are normally known for that last 20 minutes, ramping it up to that next level, drowning opposition. At the moment, they're the ones who are drowning, and they don't seem to be able to find a way out of the trend. But, of course, the rest of your backline, Tim, they will make the difference here, and they will score some points late. So who is your centre pairing with the injury of Geordie Barrett?
Yeah, so it's a big choice, this, because, like you said, Geordie Barrett's currently, I think he's getting his MRI scan, so we'll see how much of an effect that is. It's actually interesting as well, because I'm not sure what he's meant to actually start for Leinster in terms of the URC. I think he's meant to start soon, I think, or is maybe the contract, the way it works is that he's starting after the November internationals, which means that he'll have a lot of time under his belt. But still, in this position for number 12, this is actually where I've gone with Harry Plummer. This is where a position where I think he could actually be well suited in. I think he's played there for the Blues in the past as well, and it's a similar type of player in terms of he's a big build. He's a good kicker on the ball. He's a good playmaker actually. So he actually has like very similar characteristics kind of what Geordie has. I think the only thing that he hasn't really got is really the kind of the long kicking that Geordie has. But still, very solid player, and I think 12 would suit him well because with his 13 option there, this is where I've gone with Reko Lomani. So there's a bit of a similar, I guess, vibe about that, bit of chemistry, and that's kind of that's the main reason why I've kind of kept them two together there, because I think it works well in that case.
Any reason for not selecting Billy Proctor in Wellington?
This is the thing. I think that is literally the only thing that, like, he's the only player that's a bit unfortunate, I think, in this case, because I could go Billy Proctor, to be fair.
In every game, except for the one up against Fiji.
Well, he just doesn't play. Like, for some reason, Raider just doesn't like him. I don't know what it is against him, but I think just Reko, man. I would like to see a Harry Plummer Reko. Maybe this is like the Blues bit about me, where I would like to see it on the international stage. So that's the reason why I've gone with it. But look, if I'm being very experimental, I'd probably go with why not just go with Anton Brown at the 12 and go with Billy Proctor, the number 13. That's probably like the most experimental I can go with. But if you're going with what would make sense and how the All Blacks have played, Harry Plummer is probably the most realistic player in terms of what Geordie Barrett does on the side. And then Reko makes it simple, just because he's been playing there and he has the chemistry with Plummer ready from a Blue standpoint. So I guess it's the more, likely one to go with. But hey, if it's Billy Proctor then that goes in, I have no problem with that because he's an exceptional player.
I guess the benefit Reko has is he's at least had a decent last performance. A lot of the times before this stage, we have been here and we have said Rico shouldn't be in that 13 jersey because he's out of form, but they have persisted with picking him time and time again. And I mean, he finally got himself a try, had 66 meters carried, only bet one defender, but he got 2 clean breaks in the process, which is great to see for Ioane. But now my midfield combination, Tim. Now, once again, to reiterate, this is what I believe Scott Robertson would go with. Number 12, the deserving option is Anton Lienert-Brown, of course, seeing as he has been playing consistently well for the All Blacks, making his way off the bench, had a great Super Rugby season.
Yep.
Number
I know
12,
what you're going here, by the way. Yeah.
David Havili.
Exactly. I knew you were going to do it.
Exactly what I feel like Scott Robertson would do. Tasman versus Wellington. We saw David Havili in action. The man didn't look great, but he's a Crusader. He's someone that most people didn't feel should have even been in the squad in the first place, but he somehow made it in. And he's the type of guy that Scott Robertson would select here.
It's over
Anton Lienert-Brown.
I actually forgot about it for this one. I'm like, that's probably the most likely one that, makes perfect sense, actually. Now you say it, that is exactly what he's going to do. I can't believe it's Harry Plummer. That's exactly what he's going to do. It's like, it's not even like...
And the thing is, imagine the scenes, though, if Havili comes back to international rugby and actually has a good game. That would be more surprising than if he has a bad one. But who knows? Maybe because he's been out for so long, he will finally get that chance. Number 13, a man who's been out for very long, is not the one I've selected because they'll probably still go Rico Ioane in that number 13 jersey. Like you said, most likely combination, and the one I believe they should go with is Anton Lienert-Brown, Billy Proctor. Easy. It worked up against Fiji. Let's see if it works up against the Australians. But Havili, Rico Ioane, probably what we will see in this contest. Right, now we've got the back three, Tim. For myself, number 11, I have stuck with Caleb Clark. I think with the exception of the yellow card, he did have an extremely strong game. One of his catches under the high ball was absolutely phenomenal. It didn't look like he should have been able to get anywhere near it, and somehow managed to claim it. He had almost 100 meters carried throughout this game, 4 defenders beaten, 2 clean breaks, and was just all over the park for the ABs, except in that 10 minutes where he was sitting on that chair. But in terms of my right wing, this is where I have reverted back to Will Jordan. Now, I actually think he had a very solid game at fullback for the first 25 minutes. Then he seemed to completely disappear from the AB's game, which was a shame because if he played like he did throughout the early stages, the whole performance, I think that he had a lot of potential scoring more than just that one try. But overall, I think that they'll chuck him back out on the right wing. Now, Severis didn't have an awful game. In fact, he had probably one of his best games that he's had in quite some time. But I do think that they'll put Jordan there and put Beauden Barrett back at number 15, if he is, of course, back from his sickness. Now, this is a backline that could easily get reshuffled, I believe. Yeah. And maybe we will see. I was actually talking to my dad a little bit earlier on, and he was asking me about how outside of Beauden Barrett, if they were to take him out of that 15 jersey, who have they got? And I mentioned about the fact that they've got Will Jordan, who they've been playing at 14, who's a 15. They've got Geordie Barrett, who plays 15 but is playing 12. They've got Damien McKenzie, who plays 15 but he's playing 10. We don't like to play 15s in the number 15 jersey, it would seem. And the question I have for you now, Tim, outside of your starting lineup, who do you think is a specialist 15 that will eventually get that chance for the All Blacks? Because we've got to remember, Beauden Barrett was one of the best 10s in the world. Yeah. And we chucked him at 15 too.
So there's actually a lot of players, by the way, who can fill this position because I'm thinking like Super Rugby, by the way, like not just in players who are within the All Blacks currently, because yes, you can say off the back, Beauden Barrett is the 15 because that's kind of where he's been the most impactful for them since kind of Razor's been in charge. I think that's kind of fair to say that's his best position we've seen. There is like a lot of players who said like off the back that just are different positions, but I mean there is Ruben Love, of course, who is just a specialist right off the back, but just hasn't had the opportunity yet. So I think this would probably be a good game for him to kind of get involved. But do I think he'll get involved because he's just been playing in the NBC? I don't know if he'll do it.
I think kind of he also picked up a knee injury most recently in that Bunnings NBC game.
There you go. So it just
won't be back in.
I still think he's a player, by the way, down the line. He can definitely get an opportunity. I look at him. I'm trying to think who else. There's Stephen Perifetta who can play in that position. We've seen him. I think he played once there, if I'm not mistaken, against England. He had a pretty decent game actually there. So I wouldn't mind kind of him there if they wanted to put him. If we're looking way down the line, I mean, I've always been a big fan of Zoran Sullivan. I mean, he's the guy that I appreciate the most, but that's more like where he has to have a good, like he has to, it's well known that he was injured throughout last year, so he was never going to be in the conversation. But the year before, I was like, wow, that was where I could have maybe thought he would be in the consideration. But no, I think he just has to have a run of the games and maybe he's in line. But I'm trying to think, is there anyone else that I'm forgetting here? I mean, there's Chafaki actually from the Crusaders. He's been playing as a 13 though, really mostly for them. Not again, it's another player who's just out of position.
Yep. They love doing it.
Yeah, they love doing this. I mean
Sean Stevenson, if you're not playing him out on the wing, but then he's been playing out on the wing at times, so
no,
I think more consistently he's your 15.
He's a better 15. He's a better 15 because similar to Will Jordan, he's better when he has more space kind of to use. Like, yeah, no, he's probably the one. Yeah. Stevenson, I'd say Zoran Sullivan, Ruben Love. Actually, Highlanders, they had a guy, not
Jacob
Gilbert.
Ratavuki.
Yeah, Jacob Ratavuki-Menkins. Yeah. He's probably the other one. And that's probably the 4, I'd say. But no, besides that, I mean, look, New Zealand has a lot of depth, guys. Like, we just don't think about it. Like, we can make this argument where the Springboks have a lot of depth in this position, but it's where they have depth in world-class players. That's what they have. There's All Blacks. They're in a position where they have to make those world-class players. They're kind of getting the diamond out of the rough, really. They have to kind of produce the kind of diamonds here. And there's a lot of good ones. Actually, when you look at Super Rugby, it's just more of that, can they make it into the next stage? Can they make the next jump? That's the big question. But no, I think for now, it's very tough. It's a tough situation. I think they're going to stick with Bowden, I think, here. I wouldn't like to see a new player involved. Like, I'd like to see Perifetta going to go, or if this is where they put Plummer in, maybe because he can play at a 15 if needed. I mean, if you want to put the guy you said, Havili, at 15, he can also play there as well. So you never know. You just don't know.
So who have you gone with in your 15 jersey for this game?
So I have stuck with, I've just gone very standard here. I've gone with Bowden Barrett at number 15 because I think it's one of those where I can go a bit more experimental, but because he wasn't involved in that first game against the Wallabies, I just feel it's probably going to happen anyway. So he'll be the 15. Will Jordan will be the 14. But I have actually taken out Caleb Clark. This is actually where I've gone with Mark Talea to kind of start in this position. I think he just wasn't involved in that first game. That's pretty much the only reason why I put him in this position. You could also consider Severis there if you wanted to. Like we said, he had a pretty decent game actually overall when you look at it. So he could be someone there. But I just think now, I think they need a bit of a change. So that's why I put Mark Talea there.
Okay, so we've got a few changes in our starting lineup overall. But actually, it's interesting that the experimental lineup you've picked for Razor isn't that far off what the safe option is in a way as well, which is what I've been going with. But now off the bench, have you gone safe or have you gone experimental? 6-2, 5-3, what do you got?
I've gone with 5-3. I was actually considering 6-2, but will Razor do that? We haven't seen this yet. Like I need to see it first and then I can consider it. But for now, I've gone with 5-3. I've gone with George Bell as the first one, as the replacement hooker. I just think it's the luckiest scenario, really, if you want to kind of give him a go. Following that, I've then gone with Tamati Williams to finish it off as the loose head. And then for the tight head, this is where I've gone with Alberto Fassi. I believe they're going to rest Tyrell Lomax. It's a big call, but I just think he's similar to, like, you could say, Jesse Krill, really, for this box. He hasn't really not played a game, really. So I think that maybe this is a player they can just give an opportunity to. We haven't seen much of Alpha, I believe, so far for this Rugby Championship. So why not give him a go? I mean, if you want to, you can give Fletcher Newell a go, but we saw how that turned out. So I think we might as well just go with a different player here, and that's why I've considered Alpha in this situation.
Alrighty, so for myself, I've got number 16, Asafo Moore, in front of the home crowd. Number 17, Tamaiti Williams, and number 18, Pasilio Tosi. Although I would like to see Tosi in a similar situation to what we saw in the first match up against Australia. I would love to see them give Lomax the first half and then make that switch at halftime. Similar to what they did with De Groot and Tamaiti Williams. Give Pasilio Tosi time to get into his work. He had one big run. He also ended up giving away a penalty, unfortunately, in the breakdown. But I do think if you give that man more minutes, he's going to be able to really shine. But it's just whether or not they're willing to take that risk, which I don't believe is a massive risk to take because he is a world-class player. They just don't seem to want to back him as of yet. But maybe just has to bide his time and wait for that opportunity for myself at number 19. This is where I have got Patrick Tuipulotu. Like I mentioned earlier on, I want to have that experience coming off the bench late. And then number 20, if he is match fit, I have got Ethan Blackadder. But if he is not fit though, I would have Luke Jacobson as that number 20.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So for my lock off the bench, this is where I've gone with Sam Derry. He hasn't had enough minutes so far throughout the recent games in the Rugby Championship. We only kind of saw him involved in those opening 2 against the Pumas, which I thought he played pretty good in. So I'd like to see him somehow involved, if it's either starting or off the bench. So that's where I'd like to see him in there. And then, yeah, to finish off kind of next to him, I've gone with Luke Jacobson. I think this is where you could go with Sam Kane. I think it's probably the more likely scenario because, you know, we're kind of thinking about the bigger picture here where he's going to, the main goal of him really in this squad is kind of reach towards the 100 cap mark. So it would make sense to kind of put him in. But I think Jacobson kind of deserves opportunity. I think we saw a bit of him in that second half, similar towards Sam Derry. So I'd like to see him involved again within this game against the Wallabies.
And making 7 tackles off the bench, Luke Jacobson, also getting a turnover 1. Actually had some better stats than, I know that this sounds harsh, but Sam Kane in the starting lineup. In terms of just in that short amount of time, he already managed to get those better stats. But moving on to the back replacements now. For yourself, 21, 22, 23, we've already seen you use TJ. We've already seen you use Harry Plummer, which does bring some interest into your number 22 jersey, as well as that 21. Have you made a massively bold switch and given a youngster a chance here?
Indeed, I have. I have gone with Noah Homan off the bench here as the scrum half option. I think we haven't seen him involved. I think the last game he played was it the Fiji game? I think was that the Fiji game he played? So maybe Billy Proctor
treatment.
Exactly, and similar to him, that's the next player I have right here is Billy Proctor. I think again, like I said, I always wanted to include him in this game because it's just that's probably the most harsh one I probably had because he should really be starting this. It's just more that the chemistry of Plummer and Rakos is really the only reason why I kept him in there. But Proctor has to be involved in this game. If he's not involved in this game, man, that's just like, what does the guy have to do? Like, what does he have to do? Like, so I'd like to see him involved in this one, and then to finish it off. So just before I said his name, I was considering Ruben Love here, just because at the first I was thinking of 15, but again, he's injured, of course, and then I was considering Parafets in this situation because we just haven't seen him involved. But this is probably the safe option here, and I have gone with Severis. It's one of those where I'd like to put another plan in there. Like, I don't know, you could put Caleb Clark really if you want to put him off the bench, but I just don't think they'll do that. I think just Severis is probably the more likely option. Is there another player I'm forgetting that they could do? I mean, Havili actually, if they wanted to, they could put Havili there as that's the 15 cover if that's the way they see it. But no, for now I've put Severis there.
I'm just looking through at some of the stats from that game between Fiji and New Zealand. Billy Proctor had almost 100 running meters. He had 4 clean breaks. Where is he? He's been playing in the NPC for Wellington. And to be honest, he did look a little bit rusty, but that's because he's been left on the sideline for 2 months and not given a chance. Noah Hotham, he will be in that same boat. For him, it's a little bit more understandable, I would say, seeing as he was more so brought in as that injury replacement initially for Finlay Christie and then earned himself the spot in the squad. But for someone like Proctor, who was picked as a bolter and given the opportunity once, he's got to be in there. So for me, he is my number 23 coming off the bench. In this contest, number 22, this is where I have got Harry Plummer, and then number 21, TJ Perenara. Now, I originally had Noah Hotham, but then before we started recording, you started talking about how it might be TJ's final send-off, and of course, in Wellington, you said it's the perfect fairy tale ending for the man. You got into my head, so I've put him as my number 21 in this contest. But overall, pretty different sides, which is good news because we have gone with different concepts of Scott Robertson's selection. Hopefully one of us is relatively close, but we are still asking ourselves, what is the selection going to look like? Is he going to go with an experimental side, or is it going to be similar to the rest of the Rugby Championship, how we see it be a bit of the stock standard? But nonetheless, do let us know who you think Scott Robertson will be going with in his starting lineup and reserves for this match up against the Wallabies. But be sure to check out Rugbyitch's YouTube channel. His link will be in the description, as well as the pinned comment. Now, I should mention later on in the week, myself, I will have an All Blacks XV where I give my selection that I would go with if I was the coach. It's going to look very different to the one that I selected right now. I will tell you that. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. I will see you all for the next one.